Let me be absolutely direct with you right now, because nobody else is going to say this clearly enough for it to actually land. We are living through one of the most dangerous moments in modern history, and the people who are supposed to be informing you about it are too busy chasing headlines that don't matter to tell you what is actually happening on the ground in Europe. As of August 19th, 2026, NATO forces are conducting the largest war exercises against Russian territory that we have seen in years. Russian strategic bombers, Tu-95, MS aircraft, some of the most powerful long-range strike platforms in the Russian arsenal have been repositioned to new air bases. And here's the part that should make your stomach drop. Intelligence analysts have uncovered secret Russian drone launch sites, 59 new drone rails across 10 different locations along the border with Ukraine and Belarus, each one capable of housing 1,000 drones. Let me say that again. So it registers 1,000 drones per site, 10 sites. And most Americans have no idea any of this is happening. NATO forces are swarming Russian territory in a massive war exercise. Russian bombers are on the move. Secret launch points have been discovered. This is the situation on the ground right now. And you deserve to understand exactly what it means. If this channel means anything to you, if you believe that people deserve real information about what their governments are doing and what their military is preparing for, then hit subscribe right now. It costs you nothing. It keeps this conversation alive because the corporate media machine is not going to do this work. We have to do it ourselves. Let's start with what NATO is actually doing right now, because the scale of this is something the establishment press has barely touched. Over the Baltic Sea, over Poland, over Lithuania, and directly adjacent to a piece of Russian territory. Called Kaliningrad, the United States and NATO have deployed a staggering concentration of military assets. We are talking about AWACS early warning aircraft, the E-3 Sentry, which are essentially flying command centers capable of tracking hundreds of aircraft simultaneously and managing an entire air battle from the sky. We are talking about refueling tankers, which means these aircraft are not just flying around for show. They are being sustained for long-duration operations. We are talking about spy planes, reconnaissance aircraft that are vacuuming up electronic signals, communications intercepts, radar emissions, everything Russia is putting out over Kaliningrad. And we are talking about simulated bomber strike missions, where NATO aircraft are flying practice runs and actual rehearsals for bombing strikes against Russian-held territory. Now let's be precise here, because precision matters. NATO is not preparing to attack Kaliningrad tomorrow. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that NATO is making a very deliberate, very calculated, very public demonstration to Vladimir Putin and the Russian military establishment that says, we have rehearsed this. We have the assets. We have the coordination. And if you move on us, we will execute this plan against you before you can. Blink. That is what a war exercise of this scale is designed to communicate. It is not a training exercise for the sake of training. It is a message sent at volume. Using billions of dollars worth of military hardware directly aimed at the decision-making apparatus in Moscow, and simultaneously, NATO submarines have scrambled into the Baltic Sea on reconnaissance missions, not just to simulate submarine warfare, but to actively collect intelligence on Russian naval movements and capabilities inside Kaliningrad itself. Think about that. We have submarines in the water, aircraft in the sky, and ground assets in the region, all operating in concert, all focused on a single piece of Russian territory. The last time we saw an exercise of this scope and this focus, we were in a fundamentally different moment in history. We are not in that moment anymore. And here's the question that keeps me up at night. Why is this the largest exercise we've seen in years? And what does the intelligence community actually know? Because exercises of this scale don't happen because someone on a NATO committee thought it would be a good idea to run some drills. They happen because the people with access to classified information looked at what they were seeing and decided that the risk of not sending this message was greater than the risk of sending it. That is a sobering calculation. That is not a bureaucratic decision. That is a decision made by people who believe, based on what they're reading in classified briefings, that Russia is genuinely considering a military move against NATO territory. Now I need to walk you through the one piece of this story that almost nobody in mainstream media has properly explained, because it is arguably the most significant detail of the entire NATO exercise package, and it completely changes the meaning of everything else we are seeing. Among all the aircraft deployed to the Baltic for these exercises, one stands out in a way that demands your attention: the EA-37B Compass Call. If you've never heard of it, you are not alone, and that is precisely the problem. The Compass Call is one of America's newest and most specialized electronic warfare platforms. This is not a spy plane. This is not a surveillance aircraft. This is a system specifically designed to reach into an enemy's military architecture and break it. It disrupts communications, it degrades command and control networks, it overwhelms radar systems. It interferes with navigation. In plain language, if you are a Russian commander in Kaliningrad trying to coordinate your forces, trying to talk to Moscow, trying to use your radar systems, trying to navigate your aircraft, the EA-37B is the aircraft that makes all of that impossible. And we just deployed one to the Baltic Sea. Here's why that matters so profoundly. You don't send your electronic warfare platform, one of the rarest, most sensitive, most strategically significant aircraft in the American inventory, to a region just to run a routine exercise. You send it there because you want to map the enemy's electronic environment. You want to understand their radar frequencies, their communication protocols, their command network architecture. You want to know exactly what you need to jam and how to jam it if the shooting ever starts. And simultaneously, you want the enemy to know that you can do this, that you can reach in and turn their military communications into static. The Compass Call is simultaneously a collection platform and a warning shot. Its deployment to the Baltic tells Russia something specific. NATO has already been studying your electronic environment. We know how your systems communicate, and we can shut them off. That is not a subtle message. That is a knife laid quietly on the table during a tense negotiation. And yet, if you turned on cable news over the last 48 hours and tried to find a serious, substantive discussion of the EA-37B and what its deployment to the Baltic actually signals, you came up empty. Because the corporate media apparatus in this country is not built to explain complex military realities to the American public in a way that gives those realities the weight they deserve. They will give you the horse race. They will give you the political scandal. They will give you the celebrity drama. But the actual mechanics of how a potential war with Russia begins, the specific aircraft, the specific signals, the specific decisions that lead from tension to confrontation, that analysis largely doesn't make it through the filters. Which means Americans are living through a period of extraordinary geopolitical danger in a state of extraordinary geopolitical ignorance. And that infuriates me, because the people who pay the price when wars go wrong are never the media executives. They are the kids from small towns in Ohio and Georgia and Montana who end up in uniform. Let me show you the geography here. Because if you don't understand Kaliningrad, you cannot understand why everything I just described is so consequential. Kaliningrad is a piece of Russian territory, a Russian exclave that is completely separated from the rest of Russia. It is physically cut off from the Russian mainland, sandwiched between Poland to the south and Lithuania to the north, sitting on the Baltic Sea. To get from Russia proper to Kaliningrad by land, you have to travel through either Lithuania or Belarus. Kaliningrad is not a large place, but its strategic importance is almost impossible to overstate. The Russians have packed that territory with military infrastructure, naval assets, warships operating out of the Baltic Fleet, fighter aircraft, ballistic missile systems. And this is not speculation. This is widely understood by Western intelligence. Nuclear weapons. Russia almost certainly keeps nuclear warheads in Kaliningrad. So here you have a piece of Russian territory loaded with nukes, wedged between two NATO member states, giving Russia direct access to the Baltic Sea and a potential staging ground for military operations directly into the heart of NATO's eastern flank. The specific concern, the scenario that keeps NATO military planners staring at maps in the middle of the night, is what strategists call the Suwalki Gap. That is the narrow land corridor between Poland and Lithuania, roughly 65 miles wide, that separates Kaliningrad from Belarus. If Russia were ever to launch a military operation to seize that corridor, to physically connect Kaliningrad to Belarus, and thereby cut off the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania from the rest of NATO, it would be one of the most destabilizing military events in the post-Cold War era. It would effectively trap 3 NATO members behind Russian lines. And the intelligence that NATO is apparently acting on right now suggests that Russia has at minimum been studying this option, and at maximum has been actively planning for it. That is the backdrop against which all of these exercises are happening, and NATO has reportedly made its position crystal clear, leaking it deliberately to the press so it enters the public bloodstream. If Russia moves on NATO territory, Kaliningrad gets wiped off the map. That is the commitment. That is the deterrent. The question is whether it's working. Because here is what I need you to understand about deterrence. Deterrence only works if the other side believes the threat is credible and is afraid of the consequences. If Putin has made a calculation, a potentially catastrophic miscalculation, that NATO lacks the political will to actually follow through, and then all these exercises, all this posturing, all these leaked plans about destroying Kaliningrad, none of it stops anything. And if that miscalculation leads to actual military conflict between Russia and NATO, it does not stay contained to the Suwalki Gap. It does not stay contained to Eastern Europe. It does not stay contained at all. The second a Russian missile hits a NATO soldier, one soldier from any of the 32 member states, every treaty obligation, every mutual defense commitment, every Article 5 pledge comes into effect simultaneously. And now you understand why this particular corner of the European map should matter to every single American, regardless of what party they voted for, regardless of how they feel about foreign policy, regardless of whether they have ever once thought about Lithuania or Kaliningrad in their lives. If this is the kind of analysis that you need more of, the kind that treats you like an intelligent adult and actually explains the mechanics of how the world works, rather than just showing you the surface, then I need you to subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. Do you believe NATO's deterrence is working? Do you think Russia is genuinely planning an attack? Get in the comments and be real with me. I read them. This conversation matters. Now let's talk about the Russian bombers, because this is the development that in many ways is the most immediately alarming of everything we are covering today. Russian Tu-95M strategic bombers, and understand what these aircraft are. These are not tactical fighters. These are massive, long-range, nuclear-capable aircraft designed to reach targets thousands of miles away and deliver devastating payloads. These bombers have been physically relocated. They are moving from their previous bases in Russia's Amur region, repositioning toward the Alenia Air Base. And when strategic bombers move, that is not a logistics decision. That is an operational decision. Military aircraft of this class and this capability don't get repositioned on a whim. They get repositioned because a military command structure has decided that their current positioning is either inadequate for the missions being planned, or that a new position better serves the strike packages that are being developed. These aircraft carry Russia's most advanced cruise missiles. Air-launched cruise missiles with significant range, significant accuracy, and significant payload. And we already know, this is not speculation, that Russia used its strategic bomber fleet in a major combined strike against Ukraine as recently as July 30th of this year. We know that because during that attack, a Russian cruise missile crossed into Polish airspace, into the airspace of a NATO member state. So let that sink in for a moment. A Russian weapon entered NATO territory. And while that incident was ultimately described as likely accidental or a result of the missile's trajectory, the fact that it happened at all tells you something critical about the proximity of this conflict to NATO's borders, and about how quickly a contained regional war can start brushing up against the tripwires that lead to something much larger. And the repositioning of these 6 Tu-95MS bombers, combined with reports that Iskander ballistic missile systems and Bastion coastal defense systems are being readied alongside Shahed series attack drones, suggests that Russia is building toward another significant strike package. And the Iskander Minjur deserves special attention here. This is a short-range ballistic missile system with nuclear capability. Its presence in the readiness calculation for what looks like a conventional strike package against Ukraine raises questions that I don't think are being asked loudly enough in public forums. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ledger, we're seeing extraordinary footage of HIMARS, the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System provided by the United States, launching strikes into Russian-held territory. These are American weapons paid for by American taxpayers, firing American munitions, hitting targets hundreds of kilometers away, and they are unquestionably effective. But the question of what escalatory dynamic that creates, and whether the American public has ever been given a serious accounting of that dynamic, is one that Washington continues to avoid with remarkable consistency. The story of the secret Russian launch sites is in some ways the most calculated and chilling development in this entire situation, because it is not about what Russia is doing right now. It is about what Russia is building toward. According to reporting from The Telegraph, dated August 16th of this year, Russia has constructed 59 new drone launching rails at 10 different sites, positioned along the border with Ukraine and Belarus. Each of these sites is capable of housing up to 1,000 drones. Let the mathematics of that settle in your brain for a second. 59 launch rails, 10 sites, 1,000 drones per site. We are talking about a drone infrastructure of genuinely staggering scale, and it has been built quietly, methodically, and deliberately, right under NATO's surveillance apparatus, which is itself a statement about Russian confidence in their ability to operate without being stopped. The analysis of this infrastructure, conducted by a drone intelligence firm and cited by The Telegraph, found that roughly 20% of these new launch rails are unusually long, extended in a way that is specifically designed to accommodate the Shahed 4 and Shahed 5 drone variants. And this is where it gets deeply serious for anyone paying attention to ranges and trajectories. The Shahed 4 has a reported operational range of 450 to 850 kilometers. The Shahed 5 extends that to between 950 and 2,000 kilometers. 2,000 kilometers. Do you understand what that means geographically from launch sites on the Russian-Ukrainian border? A drone with a 2,000 kilometer range does not just threaten Ukrainian cities. It threatens Warsaw. It threatens Bucharest. It threatens Berlin. It enters the range envelope of NATO capitals. Now, would Russia launch drones at Berlin or Warsaw today? No, but the infrastructure to do it is being built and the capability is being developed and positioned. And when you combine that with everything else we have discussed, the bomber repositioning, the readiness of missile systems, the intelligence suggesting Russia may be planning action against NATO, the drone launch infrastructure is not a coincidence or an isolated development. It is part of a coherent military buildup whose direction is unmistakable. And here is the accountability question that I think demands an answer from every senior official in the Biden administration, in the current administration, in NATO's command structure, and in the intelligence community. If we have satellite imagery, if we have drone intelligence firms capable of analyzing this infrastructure, if we know there are 59 new launch rails at 10 different sites capable of housing 10,000 drones in total, what exactly has been done to degrade that capability? Because if the answer is not enough, then the American people deserve to know that. And if the answer is we have a plan but it's classified, then the American people deserve to at least understand the broad strokes of what their government is doing to address an existential threat to the NATO alliance. An alliance that every American taxpayer funds and that every American soldier would potentially be called upon to defend with their life. So let's bring all of this together, because I want you to walk away from this understanding not just the individual pieces, but the full picture that they create when you lay them side by side. As of August 19th, 2026, here is where we stand. NATO is conducting what may be the most significant and concentrated war exercises aimed at Russian-held territory that we have seen in years. Those exercises include not just aircraft and submarines, but one of America's most advanced and rarest electronic warfare platforms, the EA-37B Compass Call, deployed specifically to the Baltic to map and potentially disrupt Russian military communications. Russia has simultaneously repositioned two 95 MS strategic bombers to a new airbase, with missile systems and drone fleets in a heightened state of readiness, suggesting another major strike package is being assembled. And beneath all of this, satellite and intelligence analysis has revealed a massive, systematic expansion of Russian drone launch infrastructure, 59 new rails, 10 sites, drones with ranges capable of reaching deep into NATO territory. This is not a pattern that suggests de-escalation. This is not a pattern that suggests both sides are looking for an off-ramp. This is a pattern that suggests two heavily armed military alliances are moving toward each other on a road that has very few exits left. And what I want to ask you, what I need to ask you, because I think it is the most important question of our time, is this. Do you trust that the people in charge of navigating this situation are actually equal to it? Do you trust that the political leadership in Washington, the military leadership at NATO headquarters, the intelligence apparatus that is tracking all of this in real time is making the right calls at the right moments? Because the margin for error right now is extraordinarily thin. One miscalculation, one misread signal, one commander who makes a decision that escalates instead of de-escalating. And we move from a situation that is dangerous but contained to something that none of us has the language to fully describe because nothing like it has happened in our lifetimes. And here is what makes me genuinely angry. Not performatively angry, not angry for ratings, but angry in the way you get angry when you watch something important being mishandled and you know that ordinary people are going to pay the price for it. The American public is not being given the information they need to form a coherent view of this situation. The conversations that need to happen about what NATO's actual strategy is, about whether deterrence is working, about what the plan is if it fails, about what obligations American men and women in uniform would face if Article 5 is invoked. Those conversations are not happening in the open in any serious way. They are happening in classified briefings and think tank reports and diplomatic back channels that the average American will never see. And so the average American goes about their life worrying about their mortgage and their kids' schools and the cost of groceries. While the machinery of a potential world war grinds forward in a part of the world they can barely find on a map, that is not their fault. That is the fault of a media ecosystem that has systematically failed to treat foreign policy and military affairs as the life and death issues they actually are. And it is the fault of a political class that has found it more convenient to avoid hard conversations about the costs and risks of the current trajectory than to level with the American people about what is actually at stake. We owe each other more than that. This country was built on the idea that an informed citizenry is the foundation of a functioning democracy. You cannot be informed about something you are not being told. And I'm telling you right now, the situation in Europe, the NATO-Russia confrontation, building around Kaliningrad, the movement of strategic bombers, the construction of secret drone launch sites. This is one of the most consequential stories of our time, and it deserves your full attention. Watch this closely. Stay engaged, ask hard questions of your representatives, demand serious answers, and do not let anyone tell you that this is too complicated for ordinary people to understand, because that is exactly the kind of condescension that keeps power unaccountable and the public in the dark. So you are smart enough to understand what is happening. The only question is whether anyone is committed to actually explaining it to you. That is what I am here to do every single day, without apology, without agenda, without selling you a narrative, just the facts, the analysis, and the urgency those facts demand. If you are not already subscribed, do it right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments because I want to know, do you think we are heading toward direct NATO-Russia conflict? Do you think the deterrence will hold? Do you think American leadership is doing enough, or are we watching a slow-motion failure in real time? Tell me, because these conversations matter. Because the people watching from their living rooms and their phones and their commutes, you are not passive observers of history. You are part of it. Stay informed, stay engaged. And I will see you in the next one.